Hello, everyone. May I ask you all to put your headsets on? I want to see if these translators recognize my accent. 大家好，我是 Wodon， 我今天很高兴认识你们。我住在重庆，我的老婆是重庆人，但是我的中文不太好，学中文很难。我现在没有时间，但是我今天说英语，谢谢。Did you get it? Okay, so my name is Jean-Marie Wodon. I'm running this company called Zapptax, and today I'm going to try to explain to you a little bit more about what's behind this tax-free shopping craze, to unveil to you some of the little secrets of the industry and try to make you understand what's behind it. So, but I have 15 slides, and the second slide here is the most painful one, because if you want to understand what is tax-free shopping, you need to understand what is VAT. And VAT is for value-added tax. So it's a little bit technical, this slide, but you need to get it before we move on. VAT is a tax. Yes, that's easy. It's yet another way that our governments in Europe have found to sustain their operations. And it's quite a substantial one because it represents roughly 50% of government revenues across the EU. And it's a consumption tax. Contrary to corporate income tax or personal income tax, it's a tax based on consumption. Okay? And the interesting thing about VAT is that this tax is built up across the value chain. So each economic actor, when producing a good, he's going to build up this tax until the final end user, consumer, and that consumer can be a private person or a corporation, consumes that good. That's when the tax is being paid to the state. VAT is governed by EU law. It was created actually by a French guy in 1954, Mr. Lauré, and you have to be as Cartesian as a French to imagine such a diabolic system as VAT. And it spread out across many European countries, and it was harmonized in the late 70s and culminated in a VAT directive, the 2006 directive about VAT. But interestingly enough, this is Europe. Although there is this central text called the VAT directive, the collection of the VAT is left to, and the implementation of this VAT directive is left to each member state. So each member state has to implement this directive, which means that there are a lot of small differences between states in terms of how tax-free shopping works. So that's for the hardest slide in the presentation. Now, what is tax-free shopping? As I said, VAT is a consumption tax. And so the basic principle behind it is that if you do not consume the goods in the EU, the tax should not be paid. And that's why a corporation who ships a container of steel to a Chinese customer or an American customer, on the invoice, there will be no VAT because the steel is being consumed outside of the EU. So when these geniuses of the VAT directive drafted the text, they said, but what are we going to do with all these travelers? They come to Europe, they buy goods, and they take them back with them, which means that they don't consume these goods within the EU. How are we going to do? Because when they pay in store, they pay with VAT. And that's, so in these 414 articles of the VAT directive, there is one article which says that if certain conditions are met, the non-resident traveler buying goods in Europe is entitled to get a refund. So, tax-free shopping is a refund of the VAT for non-EU travelers because the consumption does not happen in the EU. So what are the conditions to benefit from tax-free shopping? There are basically three conditions. The first one, you have to be a resident outside of the EU. The important word here is resident, not national. So you can be a Chinese national living permanently in Shanghai. You come to Europe, you're entitled to tax-free shopping. But you can be a French national with a French passport living permanently in Shanghai or in New York. When you come back to Europe for Christmas, for a holiday, you buy goods, you're entitled to tax-free shopping. On the contrary, if you are a Chinese national with a Chinese passport, but you live permanently in Europe, When you go back to China to visit your family, you cannot do tax-free shopping. So it's for non-residents of the EU. Secondly, you need to buy the goods for your personal use. Let's imagine you go to Galeries Lafayette and you buy 10 Chanel bags and you try to take them with you at Charles de Gaulle. You won't get tax-free shopping for that because it's not for personal use. And third condition, you need to take the goods with you when you return home, which means that you need to have them in your suitcase, because otherwise you do not consume the goods outside of the EU and the tax is due. So how does it work today? It's fairly simple on paper. You will see that actually it's a little bit more complicated than that. You go to a store, let's say Galeries Lafayette, you buy something for 1,200 euros, and you get a form called a tax-free form. On this form, you have several mandatory information: your name, your passport number, your permanent address, proving that you live outside of the EU, description of the goods, the amount you pay, the VAT, and the refund. You take this form with you, and you go to Charles de Gaulle to take your flight back to Shanghai. You get a stamp on this form. And what is this stamp? This stamp is actually the proof that the goods left the EU and should not have been taxed when you pay them in store. Then the third step is basically you manage, there are different ways to do that, to get to send the document back to the retailer. Once the retailer gets the document, he has the proof that the goods were exported and he can refund you the VAT. That's the principle. So when I started looking into this market 2 years ago, because I was shuttling back and forth between China and Europe, I was looking at all these Asian people waiting in line to get these stamps, and was like, well, yeah, this is an anecdotal market. Well, when I looked into the numbers, I was quite surprised at the size of this market. Every day in the 28 EU countries, 100,000 stamps are being affixed on tax-free forms. So it's enormous. 50 billion euro worth of goods are being purchased every year in the 28 EU countries, and for which tax-free shopping, refund of the VAT is being requested. And the market has been growing at 10% per year on average. Of course, you know why: Chinese, emerging countries, etc. And I will show you later on that this is actually the tip of the iceberg. The market is much, much bigger for several reasons I will explain later on. So, of course, the Chinese, they represent 25% of this market. 10 years ago, 15 years ago, they represented basically zero or very little. The Russians, were the kings of tax-free shopping 10, 15 years ago. They were eclipsed by the Chinese. There is a slight recovery for Russians these days. Americans, steady force in tax-free shopping, 5%. Lots of Americans come to Europe every summer. They tend to be not as big spenders and not as much crazy about shopping than Asian customers, but still they have a high spending power. 20 years ago, it were the Japanese who were the king of tax-free shoppings. Now they receded because of the slow growth in Japan and the strength of the currency in Japan. And then, of course, you have all other Asian countries: Taiwan, Hong Kong, Singapore, Indonesia. What are the trends? Middle Eastern countries are growing strongly as well, high spending power. They're coming to Europe, they spend. China, we mentioned yesterday, I was in a cab talking to the cab driver, and he was telling me, we were talking about Chinese tourism. He said, yeah, I mean, you go to the center of London, it's full. I mean, there are only Chinese tourists, there are too many. I looked at him and said, they haven't even started. Get ready. South America, a little bit slow for now, but we'll pick up later on, I guess. So what's fueling this boom? A couple of sins. Tourism is shopping. I'm not a big shopper myself, but on average, 40% of travelers state that they will include shopping in the list of activities when they travel. This is an average. When you ask the questions to Chinese, it's 95%. Second, greed. Who would be against a good deal? All of you know that there is a big price difference between goods, luxury goods, especially in Asian markets, between Asian markets and European markets. The price difference is, on average, 20%, but it can go up to 30, 40, even 50% for certain goods. This is due to the fact that luxury goods are being highly taxed. The tariffs in China for luxury goods are very high. Also, currency fluctuations are very important. Research shows that currency fluctuations of 5 to 10% already, This is a question actually we should ask to this guy, this gentleman for forward keys, if he can see a correlation between currency fluctuation and bookings. I don't know if he's still in the room. 3, scarcity. Of course, a lot of goods, luxury goods, but not only, cosmetics as well. You cannot basically find them in China. And so that's also one of the reasons, or in other Asian markets, that's one of the reasons it's also, I mean, Chinese customers come to Europe. Trust as well. Nothing beats being at Galeries Lafayette and buying a Chanel bag. You're sure that it's a real one. Maybe not the same if you buy it on JD, Alibaba, Taobao, etc. And last but not least, vanity or experience. When you're a middle-aged, middle-class Asian person, it's much better to brag about the fact that you bought the new bag, luxury bag on Galeries Lafayette than in a shopping mall in the middle of China. So all this is fueling tax-free shopping. As I said, the market today is, according to my understanding, my research, totally underserved and inefficient. Out of, if you take 100 travelers coming to Europe, entitled to do tax-free shopping, only 15 do it. 85 do not do it. Of course, you will tell me a lot of people do not shop, of course. But I think there is another reason for that. A lot of people are just not aware of it, or they're just basically aware of the rough idea, but they don't know the details. And I think the third and most important reason is a lot of people don't bother because they don't want to wait in line, collect all these forms, send them back, etc. for 10, 20, 30, 40, 50 euros. It's not worth the trouble. Second, out of every 100 tax-free form being issued in stores in Europe, only 85 get the stamp. So 15 never get the stamp. Why don't they get the stamp? Several reasons. I mean, again, you're a middle-class Chinese couple, you've been spending 2 weeks in Paris collecting forms, you put them all in a big envelope, you go to the airport, you hand them over to the customs officer, and of course the risk of errors is pretty high. Sometimes you need to fill this form yourself, you make mistakes. And then there is the stress level. Again, you're a Chinese traveler. You spend 2 weeks in Europe. Tomorrow you're taking your flight. It's already, you feel a bit itchy. Okay, where's my passport? How do I get to the airport? Is there going to be a traffic jam? How far ahead do I need to be there? And then consider this. I'm going to find a place in the airport. I don't know where it is. I'm going to be staying in line. I don't know the length of this line. I'm going to be in front of a French customs officer who doesn't speak my language. He might ask really nasty questions. And so at the end of the day, a lot of people skip it and just don't get the stamp. So the market potential, as I said today, it's the tip of the iceberg. There is a lot more to do. What are the pain points today of tax-free shopping? I mentioned some of them already. High fees. Yeah, what I didn't say is that between retailers and travelers, a whole industry has developed of intermediaries helping retailers to do all this paperwork. So basically, you go to Galeries Lafayette, you buy something for 1,000 euro plus 20% VAT, 1,200. There are 200 VAT, where you will never get 200. You will get 140, 120, 130. And where does the difference go? In the pocket of Galeries Lafayette or in the pocket of intermediaries? On a yearly basis for 2012, for Galeries Lafayette, this represented 40 million bottom line profit through these little transactions. So fees are high. The process is outdated. I already explained that, papers, etc. It's optional for retailers. Of course, on Champs-Élysées, everybody will do it. All the retailers do it. But as soon as you venture outside the big tourist centers, in second, third tier cities, in France, in Belgium, in Germany, retailers don't do it. They don't know about it. They don't do it. So you cannot do tax-free shopping in these stores. 4, lack of transparency. I love that one. You will see everywhere retailers bragging about the fact that you can get 19% back. But in France, when you buy something for 1,200 euro, you have 200 euro VAT. You divide it 200, do the math, 200 by 1,200, it's 16.666%. So see, this is the maximum you can get. How can they claim that you get 19% back? Because In some countries in Europe, far north, VAT is 25%. So you can claim that you can get 19% back. So there is a total lack of transparency around this. Minimum purchase amount, in some countries you have minimums. In France it's 175 euros, of course, it's a barrier. Customer support, if you find yourself in trouble with some forms, I mean, you can call a call center. It's not very user-friendly. And there is a lack of uniformity across the EU. I mean, each country has a little sauce added to the VAT directive. Each airport has different rules, so it's a bit complicated. What are the long-term trends? The transactions will keep going up. The average value, I believe, will go down because people will do more transactions, but the average amount per transaction will decrease. Affordable, luxury, etc., etc. Digitization is inevitable. We speak to a lot of tax authorities. They want to digitize. Cross-border e-commerce could have an impact, and regulation as well. The Chinese consumer regarding tax-free shopping is looking for convenience, safety, speed, this is all known, bargain, and trust, of course. I need to speed up, I should already be done. So what do? Zapptax, we streamline the process before and after. Basically, our service is based on an app that you can download on iPhone or Android. And we streamline the process before the stamp and after the stamp through the use of this app. And also what's important is we do not need the intervention of the retailer. So we have partner program with, of course, because the challenge for us is to find users in source markets in China, in the US, everywhere. And so we have a partner program for travel industry players, tour operators, guides, et cetera, et cetera. So the way it works today, with us, you enjoy shopping, and I mean enjoy, you mean you don't need to ask for any form in the store. You just take the purchase receipts. Step 2, you upload your receipts with the app. Step 3, we deliver to you, we edit a tax-free form for you with all your purchases. We hand it over to you, and then you get the stamp, you upload it, the stamp on the phone, and you get your refund on Alipay, WeChat, PayPal, whatever. Voila. Download the app, don't forget. If you are a non-EU resident, you have my contact details over there. And we have a nice little promotion of £5 for if you use the code UKWBT when you register to the app. Thank you for your attention.